India has made so much progress economically, yet when you take a look at women's issues, it's still lagging way behind. In terms of women in the labor force, it is at the lowest rate in the South Asian region. Why is that still the case?
I think that there is a lack of information about the status of women in India. So let me contextualize it for you a little. We currently have 265 million children in our K-12 system, of which 50% are young girls. 43% of our STEM graduates in India are women. Of the entire, I think, ecosystem of loans given by financial institutions backed by the government without any collateral, 400 million loans given for the smallest of the small businesses. 70% of beneficiaries are women-led businesses, women-owned businesses. The Prime Minister also ensured that women who had access to no financial institution so that they would leverage instruments had, courtesy the government, the opening of bank accounts. And apart from the 500 million bank accounts that India has opened, the bigger story is that 230 million of that is only women-owned bank accounts. So if you look at the labor force participation rate, it is at 37% now. Unemployment is at its lowest ever in the decade. That too, at a post-pandemic level, it is nothing short of a miracle. But who are the women who don't get counted? We have a robust grassroots female fiscal ecosystem called the self-help group. We have close to 90 million women who do businesses worth annually of $37 billion. They do not get counted in the framework of labor force participation. Women who do small businesses on their own with the help of financial institutions don't get counted. Women who are in the unorganized sector, who own in an unorganized fashion their little piece of businesses and enterprise. Let's say in agriculture, we are a predominantly agrarian society is what people presume about India, not taking into consideration that our service sector has grown robustly, that our IT sector now is a segment that the world celebrates. But the fact that even in our agrarian economy, 80% of the women who participate there as labor, if you may so call it, are women. So we've had institutionally participation of women going up across various segments. The issue is, are we counting them all?
So you're saying there is a misconception as far as the world is concerned, yet there's still issues that are being brought about. People talk about safety issues of women at the workplace. They talk about social pressures that women face. I mean, how do you overcome those issues and how do you correct the misconception?
Social pressures are not faced by women in one demography or geography alone. That's a worldwide phenomena. But if you just reflect, if you say that there is an anomaly in what I believe is India's perceived at, what is one of the contextual foundations of that anomaly? It is the Global Gender Gap Index report. Now, the Global Gender Gap Index report, if you look at it politically, does not take into consideration the fact that 1.5 million women are elected to office in our rural ramparts. That women who serve in legislative assemblies in states and are elected to office are not considered by the Gender Gap report. Women who are ministers in state governments are not taken into consideration. You'll be shocked, women in the Council of Ministers of the Prime Minister are not taken into consideration at all. So these are the missing numbers. If you just compute in the political segment that number, our numbers in the index then rise exponentially. What has happened in WEF in 2023 is a recognition by the World Economic Forum that yes, these are the missing numbers, these are the women whose potential has been politically supported by people across India, but they are not being counted. And WEF has given us a written assurance of reflecting on this and looking at the opportunities more and more across the globe of looking at democracies where women at the grassroots now are getting elected. But I come here now in the wake of a historical piece of legislation that passed in the new parliament building in India, which is possibly we are the only country on the promenade at the World Economic Forum, which now has a 33% reservation for women in parliament. That's never happened.
So are you saying there is gender parity in politics in India?
In politics, in labor, our labor and ethics codes have very, very deliberately articulated and etched for every segment of our economy equal pay for equal work. internal complaints committee in every organization which has 20 and more employees, of ensuring that women who want to report harassment at work can have access to that instrument within their business organizations. In every police station of the country, there is a women's help desk. In every district of the country, there is an anti-human trafficking unit. We also have one-stop crisis centers so that women who are victims of violence can have access to medical aid, legal aid, free of cost, police support, short stay homes across every district of the country. In India now, operationalized across every state are women helplines. So we have an emergency response system which has been established by Prime Minister Modi, which did not exist as an infrastructure for women to get help from authorities before he took office. The system for women vis-a-vis justice would be incomplete if we do not look at providing judicial support in our legal framework for women. And that is why we have sanctioned budgets for 1,063 fast-track courts in the country, of which 400 courts are especially for children who are victims of violence. We've recently computed the number of the past 1.5 years of cases that were filed by women to seek justice. And the numbers say that close to 200,000 women have received judicial support and legalese from these particular frameworks and these courts, which are specially dedicated to women. So be it women who are provided legislative and administrative interventions to make sure that they're safe at work, be it providing fast-track courts, be it providing help at police stations or crisis centers. We also ensure that cities which are now blooming with more and more female participation, not only at the workplace, but also those who want to have a higher possible engagement with academic institutions, have working women hostels. All of that is funded by the government.
We've been talking about politics. It makes a lot of sense to separate politics from religion, but increasingly across the world, we've seen a blurring of lines. How are you assessing that and the implications?
The Prime Minister has been vehement in India. He says for him the Constitution is his religion. Given that we are home to a population of close to 230 million Indians who practice various religions, which the world considers a minority population. So I think India is home to diverse religious beliefs, diverse cultures. But as the head of the government, the Prime Minister has been very vehement in expressing his religious belief, which is the Constitution of India. But if you look at the delivery of benefits across government, you will find that of the entire segment of beneficiaries, over 30 to 33% of the beneficiaries are only from the minority community. However, I believe as an Indian that no Indian is a minority in his or her own country, that we are all equal under the law. But there is obviously a global practice of looking segmentally at various individuals on the basis of their religious beliefs. So we are home to some of the oldest religions and we celebrate our diversity, but we serve it constitutionally equally under the law.
In your view, what's the biggest challenge for India when you consider the issues of women, gender parity, human rights?
I think that if you look at the promenade, one of the buzzwords here is AI. And instead of looking at it from a perspective of artificial intelligence, to look at it from an augmented intelligence perspective, I'm very happy that India today leads the chair on the alliance of AI and how we can create a consciousness about responsible use of AI. When I look about the issues of women, there has been a global concern about how well informed are the algorithms, given that data sets have historically embedded in them a bias. India today is at the precipice where we can look at those biases that get fed into the systems, where biases possibly then get repackaged. And now we are, and the Prime Minister has said this recently, we need to watermark content, so that if there is any form of prejudice, if there is a challenge that technology throws open, we as policymakers or people who are thought leaders or industry leaders for that matter can address that issue. I think the unspoken truth about the impact of Indian policy, women, and especially health, we run the largest health program in the world. I'm responsible for gender in India. We run the largest nutrition based program in the world on one digital platform with 1.4 million brick and mortar nutrition centers in the country with 2.2 million service providers. We look at the daily nutritional needs of 100 million beneficiaries, of which 75 million are kids below the age of 6 and 25 million are pregnant and lactating mothers. But more so, since you're talking about cultural biases towards women, there was a presumption that cancer of the cervix or cancer of the breast will never get publicly spoken of. Prime Minister Modi started something called the Ayushman Bharat Yojana, 110 million families. And if you look at 4 people per family, then that means it's a sizable number of people. 440 million people get free health support across 27,000 hospitals in the country. But what is the gender benefit of it? We've had over 20 million women in just the past 1 year and a half who've got themselves screened for cancer of the breast and the cervix. For the first time from the ramparts of the Red Fort, where the Prime Minister addresses the whole country on Independence Day, we had a male Prime Minister speak about access to menstrual hygiene product like a sanitary pad at 1 rupee. That has never happened, which means that issues and conversations that from a gender perspective were taboo, Prime Minister Modi has mainstreamed it. Another very controversial decision, if you look at it from the developed countries' context, termination of pregnancy at 24 weeks was an issue that was somewhere in the backyards of legislative murmurs since the 1960s in my country. Prime Minister Modi said that if there is a legislative need to legitimize that medical practice and ensure that women's rights, and these are not women in multitude, these are women who are few and far between, but we passed that legislation in both houses of parliament without a single man in India going against Prime Minister Modi's desire to ensure women get justice when it comes to reproductive rights. I think the challenge is that these stories are not told often. And that is why I'm grateful that I have this opportunity to converse in Bloomberg.
Minister, just one final question. Economists have said that greater participation of women in India would add about 1.5% to GDP. Obviously, from the numbers that you have given us today,
it's going to be more.
It's going to be more. I'm just wondering, what is a realistic target? I mean, how much more can women contribute to?
Tom Petty had sung a beautiful song which said, "The future is wide open." And it's better and brighter when women are at the center. Women believe in equitable distribution of resources within their family units and their communities. Today in India, we have close to 19 million women who are serving administratively and constitutionally at various posts across Government of India and across our district administrations. So while you're trying to quantify the economic impact, and justly so, I think the social impact of the revolution which is underway also needs consideration. Before I came to your program, I looked upon this interface that women who are banking correspondents talking to the Prime Minister, talking about taking authentication documents from general citizens, going to a bank, helping them open bank accounts, people who are making cash transactions, taking that money every day, 300,000 rupees every day in some village in India, taking it and getting it deposited in a bank. Imagine the fiscal revolution that is underway. Could just compute the service that she's giving and what she receives as an economic benefit. So the growth is going to be exponential. I think they were being cautious about the 1.5%. I'm sure the person who was doing the calculation was most definitely a man.